Amityville was one of those quiet little towns in upstate New York, where everyone knew each other and rarely anything out of the ordinary happened. Lined-up houses, well-kept gardens, children running through the streets, everything seemed to follow the typical routine of a peaceful community. But that changed brutally on November 13, 1974, when a shocking crime transformed the address 112, Ocean Avenue into one of the most feared and talked about places in modern history. That morning, around 3 a.m., Ronald DeFeo Jr., then 23 years old, silently walked through the house where he lived with his parents and 4 siblings. Armed with a .35 caliber Marlin rifle, he first entered his parents' bedroom, Ronald Sr. and Louise DeFeo. Both were fast asleep. Without hesitation, he shot them while they were still lying down. The silence of the house was broken in seconds, but no one woke up immediately. A few minutes later, Ronald went to his siblings' rooms, Dawn, 18, Allison, 13, Mark, 12, and John Matthew, 9. One by one, they were all killed while they slept, without any sign of struggle or attempt to escape. This would intrigue investigators for decades. How could 6 people be murdered with a noisy rifle without anyone waking up or trying to escape? After the massacre, Ronald showered, dressed, and went to work as if nothing had happened. Later that day, he ran to a nearby bar shouting that his family had been murdered. The police quickly arrived at the scene, finding the bodies lined up in their beds, all face down, a disturbing detail that still raises speculation today. In the early hours, Ronald DeFeo portrayed himself as a victim, saying that the mafia had killed his family. But his story changed several times, and inconsistencies quickly emerged. After hours of interrogation, he finally confessed. "A voice told me to do it." He claimed to hear voices inside the house ordering him to kill his family members, something that would later become the basis for the supernatural aspect associated with the case. The Amityville community was in shock. News spread across the United States, and soon the house became synonymous with horror. The police, perplexed by the absence of signs of a struggle and the killer's contradictions, closed the case criminally, but opened the door to one of the most discussed, distorted, and exploited stories in modern popular culture. What no one imagined is that, after this terrible crime, a second, even more frightening story would emerge. Right arrow the supernatural experience lived by the Lutz family, who would move into the house a little over a year later. And it was from then on that Amityville ceased to be just a real crime, to become a worldwide phenomenon, mixing facts, accounts, fear, and myth. As the crime that shocked Amityville seemed to finally be fading from the headlines, the house at 112, Ocean Avenue once again gained international attention. In December 1975, just over a year after the DeFeo massacre, the residence was put up for sale at an extremely low price, around $80,000, far less than its normal value. For many, this would already be cause for suspicion. But for George and Kathy Lutz, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to start a new life. The newlywed couple, along with their 3 children, were looking for a larger home, and the house seemed ideal, spacious, beautiful, with an elegant colonial style and a quiet neighborhood. When the realtor mentioned the house's history, 6 brutal murders in the bedrooms where the children would sleep, Kathy became apprehensive. George, skeptical and practical, brushed it off. After talking, they decided to go ahead. They believed that, with faith and unity, nothing could affect them. Little did they know that they were about to live an experience that would change their lives forever. The family moved in on December 18, 1975. The first moments were normal, boxes scattered around, children running through the hallways, laughter echoing through the empty house. However, things changed with frightening speed. The atmosphere inside the residence began to feel heavy, suffocating, as if the house were breathing along with them, but irregularly, tensely, vigilantly. On the second day, George woke up at 3:15 a.m., the same estimated time as the murders, and found himself looking out the window, as if something were calling him outside. On the third day, the temperature inside the house began to fluctuate inexplicably. Even with the heating on full blast, George felt an intense cold that seemed to come from the floor and climb up the walls. Kathy, previously skeptical, began to sense presences when walking through the hallways. Objects moved. Doors slammed shut without any wind. The room where the DeFeos were found seemed to have a constant smell of women's perfume mixed with something metallic. The children reported imaginary friends and shadowy figures that darted past corners. In the youngest daughter's room, Missy, one figure became recurrent, Jody, a being the girl described as a friend who looked like a big pig with red eyes. George initially ignored it, believing it to be childish imagination, until the day he entered the room and saw all the toys turn towards the window, as if waiting for someone. Later, he would claim to have seen two red dots shining in the dark, fixed on him. George's personality also began to change. He, once calm and affectionate, became easily irritated, obsessed with keeping the fireplace lit, as if he feared the living cold of the house would reach him. The children began to avoid him. Kathy dreamed every night about the DeFeo murders, seeing each shot in real time, feeling the fear and confusion of the victims. Things took a dramatic turn when the family discovered a secret room hidden behind a bookcase in the basement, a tiny, windowless room painted bright red. The Lutz's dog refused to enter. George described the smell as something he had never smelled before. Some investigators would later call this place the energy room, where one of the supposed sources of supernatural activity was located. Each night, the phenomena intensified. Doors slammed shut so hard that the hinges bent. Footsteps could be heard in the attic. The children woke up covered in bruises they couldn't explain. And, in one of the most terrifying episodes, Missy's bed reportedly lifted slowly off the floor without anyone touching it. But the worst was yet to come. On the 28th day, after a night of pure chaos, with voices, screams, shadows, and objects flying through the house, the family finally fled, leaving everything behind: clothes, furniture, food, personal belongings. They never returned. And so the famous 28 Days of Terror in Amityville were born, giving rise to books, films, and decades of debate about what really happened in that seemingly ordinary house in New York. After the Lutz family hastily abandoned their Amityville home, leaving furniture, clothing, and personal belongings behind, the case quickly gained the attention of the local media. The story of a family fleeing a house with a history of massacre in less than a month seemed extraordinary in itself. But what truly ignited the public imagination was the claim that supernatural forces were behind the terror experienced there. And that was precisely the kind of call that attracted the most famous paranormal investigators of the time, Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens had already worked on dozens of cases of alleged hauntings and were known for combining knowledge of demonology, spiritual sensitivity, and detailed investigation. When they arrived at 112 Ocean Avenue in February 1976, they brought with them a complete team: cameras, recorders, mediums, infrared photographers, and specialized technicians. It was, in effect, a professional supernatural investigation operation. As soon as Lorraine crossed the front door, she said she immediately felt a presence of pure evil, something heavy, suffocating, as if the house itself were alive and watching her every step. She walked slowly down the hallways, touching the walls, breathing deeply. At one point, upon entering the room where the DeFeo children had been killed, Lorraine claimed to have seen, in her mind, the last terrifying images of the family before the massacre. In the basement, the location of the mysterious red room, she described feeling a non-human energy, something that, according to her, was associated with dark practices carried out there decades before. Ed, in turn, stated that he felt a strong pressure on his chest, accompanied by the sensation of being stared at by several eyes at the same time. During that night, the team installed automatic cameras at various points in the house. One of them captured one of the most famous images of the investigation: the silhouette of a boy with bright eyes, looking down the hallway from the top of the stairs. Many claimed that he resembled John DeFeo, the 9-year-old boy who was murdered. Others said it was just a misinterpreted shadow. But the photo would become one of the strongest symbols of the supposed haunting. With each new step in the investigation, stranger reports emerged. sudden temperature changes, muffled sounds coming from the walls, the smell of sulfur, objects moving on their own. Lorraine claimed the house was infested, not by a spirit, but by something much older and more violent. Despite this, the Lutz couple maintained public silence. The trauma of those 28 days had deeply shaken them. George suffered constant nightmares. Kathy said she felt she was still being watched even outside the house, and the children were even afraid to sleep with the lights off. In later interviews, George said, "I would have preferred they called us crazy. What we experienced in there wasn't human." The media, of course, perceived the sensationalist potential of the story. Reporters camped out in front of the house, photographers tried to capture every detail, and curious onlookers traveled miles just to see the place where, supposedly, an invisible evil hid. That's when the narrative began to slip from the hands of those involved. In 1977, writer Jay Anson published the book, The Amityville Horror, based on the Lutz family's account. The book became an instant bestseller, selling millions of copies and transforming the story into an international phenomenon. Soon after, films, documentaries, TV debates, independent investigations, and fierce criticism followed. And it is precisely here that the controversies arose. Some investigators claimed that much of the Lutz family's supernatural experiences were exaggerated or even fabricated to generate profit. Lawyers involved in the case pointed out contradictions in testimonies. Forensic experts claimed that certain details were impossible. Critics said the book romanticized and distorted real facts. The Lutz family, for their part, argued that they never intended to profit from the story, and that the profit obtained did not compensate for the trauma they experienced. They insisted that every reported event was true and that the controversies arose because people simply did not accept the idea that evil could exist in such a concrete way. Ed and Lorraine Warren maintained their position until the end of their lives. There are cases that have an explanation. And there are cases that we simply recognize as pure evil. Amityville is one of them. Between belief and skepticism, Amityville became more than a haunted place. It became a mirror where the world projected its fears, its doubts, and its fascination with the inexplicable. To this day, no consensus has been reached. But one thing is certain. The myth was born only because something terrible, whether paranormal or psychological, really happened in that house. After the Lutz family's desperate escape, the house at 112 Ocean Avenue remained empty for months. It was as if the property itself were under quarantine, isolated by a collective fear. Rumors circulated that no one dared to enter, not even real estate agents. Many said that at night, lights turned on by themselves, shadows moved through the windows, and sounds came from inside, even though the house was officially uninhabited. Others believed it was all just mass hysteria fueled by the media. But what no one could deny was that Amityville had suddenly become a symbol of something that went far beyond the walls of that house. With the publication of The Amityville Horror, the story exploded worldwide. In a few months, Amityville became a macabre destination for curious onlookers, ghost hunters, journalists, and even people who swore they felt the presence of evil entities just by passing by the street. The lives of neighboring residents turned into chaos. The police had to block off the area during peak hours to prevent riots. It was as if the place had become a convergence point for all human fears, and also for controversies. After all, starting in 1977, conflicting versions began to emerge. Some independent investigators claimed to have found evidence that certain events reported by the Lutz family were exaggerated or could not be confirmed. A lawyer involved in the case even suggested that part of the story might have been constructed in informal conversations fueled by alcohol. Others accused the Lutz family of profiting from the sensationalism. However, George and Kathy always stood firm on their version, even when it generated attacks, doubts, and emotional strain. They insisted, repeatedly. We didn't want fame. We wanted to escape that house. Ed and Lorraine Warren, for their part, never backed down from their assertions. For them, there was something evil there, something that, according to Lorraine, was anchored in the deepest layers of the house and nurtured by the DeFeo massacre. They argued that evil can infiltrate places marked by extreme suffering, becoming a kind of self-sustaining energy that feeds on sensitive people who pass through. Skeptics dismissed this view, saying the Warrens were contributing to fueling the myth. Still, the couple's credibility and track record made it difficult to completely dismiss their observations. Interestingly, families who lived in the house afterward claimed to have experienced nothing more than typical annoyances of an old residence. No voices, no shadows, no Jody, the supposed demonic pig seen by Melissa Lutz. This further divided the public. If other people lived there without problems, could what happened to the Lutz family be linked to them, and not to the house? Some psychologists suggested that the family might have suffered post-traumatic stress, influenced by the violent history of the residents, creating a psychological environment conducive to paranormal interpretations. Believers, on the other hand, said that the presence manifested itself only to vulnerable people, or at certain times. Others even claimed that the house could have been purified without this being publicized. While the scientific and spiritual debate grew, popular culture transformed Amityville into a true horror franchise. Films, remakes, books, series, podcasts, and documentaries spread the story across generations. Even those who never read the book knew, somehow, that there was a haunted house in Amityville. The story became a landmark, like the Bermuda Triangle or Roswell, a point of permanent mystery in the collective imagination. Today, decades later, the house at 112 Ocean Avenue still exists, renovated, renumbered, with new owners trying to lead normal lives. The street is quiet, as it always was. But the number the house bears, and the story it holds, remain as invisible scars. And when someone passes in front of the gate, especially at night, it's hard not to feel the weight of doubt. After all, what really happened inside that house? Was it all made up? A collective psychological breakdown? A media manipulation? Or, is there something that has truly inhabited that place since before the DeFeo massacre? That question has never been answered. And perhaps that's precisely what keeps Amityville alive for so long. The fact that it's a mystery that can't be fully proven, nor completely denied.